Thank you. I'm Judy Alexander. I'm a tri-chair with the Michigan chapter of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are just delighted that we've got so far 14 folks ready to stand up for your right to vote. This session is co-sponsored tonight by Southeast Michigan Jobs with Justice, excuse me, and by Voters Not Politicians. Tonight, we hope to fill you in on what the anti-vote forces are doing to interfere with our right to vote, the linchpin of our democracy, and we're going to talk about what to do about it. It's our hope that as many of you who are able will sign up with Volunteers Not Politicians as a volunteer. They're going to tell us what they're doing specifically to protect our right to vote and how each one of us can get involved to help. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Sam Stark. Sam is an organizer with Southeast Michigan Jobs with Justice, and he is going to give us some context of what's happening with our right to vote in Michigan. Okay, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Judy. First of all, I want to thank my old friend Russ Belant, who's been researching these new right conservative organizations for decades. So he steered me in the right direction. What I wanted, there's two objectives that I want to achieve here, is to look at who's pushing these voter suppression bills and what's their goal. First thought was who's pushing it. Let me give you a reveal right from the beginning. It ain't Trump. I mean, he ain't smart enough, and neither are the people around him. It takes a lot more sophistication. Who we're looking at, who's really behind this nationally, is a group called the Heritage Foundation. I don't know how many people are familiar with this group, the Heritage Foundation. They were founded in 1973, co-founded by a guy named Paul Weyrich. He's noted, he's quoted quite often in conservative circles for what he said back then. What he said was, they want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down. So that tells you a lot about what the Heritage Foundation was founded on. At the other time, he also said, defining what the Heritage Foundation is all about, he says, we are radicals working to overturn the present power structure of this country. And who was the power structure back in 1973? Started with the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt and the Truman administrations, following through the Great Society with President Kennedy and Johnson. And in between, even President Eisenhower, the Republican moderate president, supported Social Security and the New Deal. He said any Republicans that opposed Social Security were stupid and should not be listened to. The party has changed a lot since then. This is a party that voted for Social Security, voted for voting rights bill and Medicare, and not a single vote was cast for the Affordable Care Act. The power structure that they're referring to are the liberal Dems and the Eastern GOP establishment. Paul Weyrich represented a movement called the New Right. It was founded in the middle 70s. And what motivated them was the reality that in 1929, the top 1% of Americans owned 50% of the wealth. By 1973, the year that the Heritage Foundation was founded, the top 1% owned 19%. So you can see that there is a tremendous, massive shift of wealth from the very top down to the middle class, and even helped some of the poor. But what has taken them so long to address the issue of voter suppression? Trump's big lie created a huge opportunity they never had before, and they are weaponizing Trump's big lie now. How do we know that the Heritage Foundation is behind this voter suppression? Because they said so. In April 22nd, Jessica Anderson, Executive Director of Heritage Action, arm of the Heritage Foundation, bragged about their role in a private speech to foundation donors in Tucson, Arizona, a tape which Mother Jones Magazine got a hold of and did a very lengthy article report on it. One of the things that Jessica Anderson bragged about in the tape was this. The Georgia voter suppression law had 8 key provisions that Heritage recommended. They not only recommend, but they write them, they draft them. And 2 of the policies stand out of the 8. 1, the policy severely restricting mail ballot drop boxes, and the second, preventing election officials from sending absentee ballot request forms to voters. This seems to be a universal theme across the country. Heritage has spent $24 million so far passing these laws in Arizona, Michigan, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Nevada, Texas, and Wisconsin. What is the Heritage Foundation's objective? It's too soon to tell, but it's not that hard to predict. In 1974, a year after they founded, they had organized in West Virginia to oppose school textbooks that taught African-American history and culture. In 1980, their 1,200-page document, Mandate for Leadership, was a guideline for the Reagan administration. And 2 of the things that stand out is the recommendations they made to give more money to the Pentagon and cut spending for public education, welfare, and healthcare. 4 years later, in the second Reagan administration, the second Mandate for Leadership manual came out for the elimination of food stamps, Medicare, child nutrition, farm assistance, legal services for the poor, repeal of $1,000 tax exemption for seniors, and last but not least, limiting voting rights and enforcement. I want you to keep this in mind. The Heritage Foundation political agenda is based on its version of a conservative ideology and values. The set of values represented says government is the problem, free enterprise is the solution, and individual Americans should practice personal responsibility and not rely on government. How does their conservative values translate to real life? There's a sentence from the Mandate for Leadership, volume number 2, which gives us a hint of where their heart is. Quote was, laws for the education of the handicapped then selfishly drained resources from the normal school population. In a misguided effort to help a few, the many have been injured. Numerous quotes like this. Not that many people know about the Heritage Foundation. They play a role behind the scenes, and they're not Trump supporters. Trump is too unstable. He's too erratic. He's the guy that pledged to his voters that he is not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. They're not doing this for his sake. But one last thing is that we should give a call out, a shout out to the Heritage Foundation for their public service. And what it is their voter fraud database. You can go to their website and find out exactly how many people committed voter fraud in 2020. In Michigan, take a guess. How many people were convicted for voter fraud? Pat, how many? 3? Too high. 1. The guy from Canton Township who forged his daughter's absentee ballot. He's probably trying to do a favor, fairly innocent. He got a probation, $1,000 fine. But in those key states that we hear a lot about now, Texas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, what do you think the total number of convictions were in those 4 states in 2020? We all know that there's those charges being made. And Pat shaking her head no. 1. Texas, 0. Florida, 0. Georgia, 0. Arizona, 1. One guy voted twice, once in Arizona, once in Nevada. Anyways, we need to keep, we can't make this just a partisan battle between us and Donald Trump. There's too many people who love Donald Trump and think he's their hero. He's too erratic for the Heritage Foundation. He gets in the way of what they're trying to do. And we need to be very clear that there's a power behind this, which is not in the favor of American middle class, working class, or poor. The Heritage Foundation is a dangerous institution, maybe not as dangerous as Trump's authoritarianism and his move toward fascism, but we need to explain to who we're fighting, and these are people who've been fighting us for 40 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that powerful message on letting us know the historical perspective that this is a coordinated attack on our democracy that has been going on for decades now. It's not only attacking our voting rights, but it's attacking our public education, our public assistance. It's attacking what I grew up with growing up in the 50s, the idea that the middle class is the backbone of America and that the working class is the backbone of America. That's what's at stake here. That's really what's at stake. So the Poor People's Campaign is all about when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. And that's why we feel that protecting our democracy, not just our right to vote, but our whole system of government that the Heritage Foundation wants to tear down, we feel this is important. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Murphy-Kovalik. She is with Voters Not Politicians, and she's going to let us know what we can do about this threat.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, I'm going to share my screen just so you don't have to just look at my face. All right, my name is Kim Murphy-Kovalik, as Judy said. I am the State Field Director with Voters Not Politicians. I have been involved with VNP since 2016, late 2016. We are a nonpartisan organization. You know, in this particular season of politics and activism, the opposition is very clearly the Republican Party, which is unfortunate. We do know, though, that this is an extreme section of the Republican Party who are pulling the strings here. You know, we're the organization that brought Prop 2 and put it on the ballot, and it passed in 2018. That was the proposition to end gerrymandering. The MICRC is working right now. Their final maps have been submitted, if you've been following that. We've also done a few other things since then. Our clerk engagement program, nights and weekends, where we work to bring increased access to the ballot for over 1 million Michiganders. And then we ran a candidate accountability campaign in 2020. In 2018, another revolutionary proposal was on the ballot and passed with overwhelming support, and that was Prop 3. It brought automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, no excuse absentee voting, and risk-limiting audits. It was overwhelmingly approved by voters. It won in 80 out of 83 counties with over 67% of the vote. And, you know, we know from 2020 that Michigan voters deserve and can have both security and access. It was a record turnout, including almost 3.2 million absentee ballots in the 2020 general election, and over 5.5 million people who cast their ballot. More than 250 audits confirmed the accuracy and security of that election. There were post-election audits conducted by the Bureau of Elections and the Secretary of State, and then an 8-month investigation by our very own Michigan Senate Oversight Committee. 3 out of 4 of which members are Republicans, and they found no evidence of fraud. This is the last time I'm going to say the word fraud during this presentation. Protecting the freedom to vote. So we're here now because there is, as Sam so eloquently pointed out, a nationwide coordinated effort to suppress the vote. And we first heard of the anti-voter agenda coming to Michigan in late March, and we got into action right away. So the plan all along has been to introduce a series of laws in the Michigan GOP, the Michigan Senate, introduce 39 bills covering a variety of issues, targeting drop boxes, absentee voting, just a bunch of different issues. Those particular bills made their way through the Senate Elections Committee. They had weekly hearings in the Senate. Some similar bills and some of the same bills made their way to the House. In July, Senate Bill 303 and 304 passed the Senate and the House with multiple amendments. They came back to that in October and amended it again to make it mirror almost exactly the petition that is now being circulated in Michigan. As expected, Governor Whitmer vetoed 303 and 304 in late October, and they were engineering that particular event since March, using the governor's veto to rile up their base and, you know, get their volunteer signature collecting machine going. I'm not going to spend too much time here because Sam talked about heritage quite a bit, but there is quite a bit of money behind this. What they don't have is a grassroots power that we do. So this is where we are right now. There's a statutory ballot initiative that is being circulated in the field. The legislators, the people behind this bill, the Senate Republicans and the Michigan GOP, they have a plan all along to just adopt this into law. Michigan's Constitution allows that a statutory ballot initiative, once it has gathered the required number of signatures, can simply be adopted without ever being put on the ballot. The governor will never have a chance to veto it. Once they have their, 340 some thousand signatures required, then they will be able to simply adopt it into law with a majority vote in both chambers, the Senate and the House. We have managed to delay them already. The plan in March was to get this out there and have all of this in place before the end of this year, so that these conditions that are in the petition would be in place for the 2022 elections. And they are virtually out of time for that. I don't see any path for that to happen at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in the petition. First, it does remove the affidavit option for voters who forget their ID. This option was not used by a lot of voters in 2020, about 11,000 people. Michigan already has a very strong voter ID law in place. The more damaging parts of the petition, you really deserve a lot more airtime. So, it really is an attack on absentee ballot voting. Okay, because absentee voting was so popular and so successful throughout the state, even in just this last November election that we had. I don't have all the numbers yet, but in some places, 80% of ballots were cast by absentee ballot. But this new petition would require a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of a social security number to be written on the absentee ballot application and sent through the mail. For many people, this is a risk to their identity, a risk of identity theft, that they just won't do it. It's enough of a risk that people won't want to send that information through the mail. The petition restricts election officials, even local clerks and the Secretary of State, from sending absentee ballot applications unless they're specifically requested. I want to back up just one second. If a voter requests an absentee ballot application and does not provide the correct information, the petition requires that the clerk sends a provisional absentee ballot, which is astounding to me. It's going to cause mass confusion. So the very people who would not be able to get to their clerk's office to show the proper ID would then be forced to cast a provisional absentee ballot and then make it back to their clerk's office within 6 days after an election in order to provide the correct identification. The petition restricts private funding or support for elections. I'm sure everyone here is aware, like in 2020, because it was the first time we had no reason absentee voting. And that combined with the COVID restrictions and the shutdowns all over the state meant that we saw a lot of grant money coming in to the state of Michigan in order to help clerks do their job, to provide them with money to hire extra staff, to buy drop boxes, to buy ballot folding machines and envelope opening machines. All these things that were required to deal with the influx of absentee ballots. The petition also provides a $3 million fund to provide free state ID. This seems like a kind thing to do, but Michigan already has something like this. And what it actually does is make the petition virtually referendum proof. The people who will be harmed by Secure My Vote, the Secure My Vote petition, in particular, seniors who have surrendered their driver's licenses no longer have a valid up-to-date ID because they just don't need it, but they are still eligible voters. People who want to vote absentee but don't know how to apply. Anyone whose ID is lost or stolen. Clerks, especially in less affluent communities. And voters will be subjected to an increased risk of identity theft. And there's a very narrow scope of people who will actually benefit from it: identity thieves, and number one, politicians and special interests, who, first of all, want to appease believers of the big lie, but more importantly, will win when fewer eligible citizens vote.